testimony from one of my favorite people, Admiral Harris. And I was so excited to be there at the time that everyone was paying tribute to you in your upcoming retirement. I stumbled into that big party of people who were rejoicing that of the great contributions you've made. And we appreciate so much having you here. I only regret it'll probably be your last time here. The committee would like to congratulate you along with me. Chairman McCain has asked me to submit a statement for the record. I'm going to go ahead and quote him at this time. The National Defense Strategy offers a new framework for thinking about the global challenges we face and places China squarely at the top of our priority list. As we turn our focus to great power competition and near-peer threats, we must face up to the true nature of the reality of Chinese power and ambition. For evidence, unquote, for evidence that Secretary Mattis identified priorities in the NDS correctly, we need to look no further than what's happening with China. Of course, everyone's familiar with Russia and with the threats that are out there with the North Korea, but they haven't thought really about China in the framework that we have now seen it from our trip out there. I was recently out with members of this committee, and we had a chance to see it firsthand. I'm hopeful that our recent agreement to increase U.S. defense spending will help us to recover from our current readiness and modernization crisis and prepare for future threats in Asia and beyond. I recently returned from that trip, and with several members of this committee, we visited the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. We observed firsthand the threat that Chinese expansionism in the region and the need for American leadership to assure, if necessary, to defend our allies. Admiral Harris, the committee looks forward to your very candid assessment of the threat that's out there. We appreciate your being here with us, Senator Reid.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Harris, thank you for being here to testify on behalf of yourself and for General Brooks. It's unfortunate General Brooks is unable to join us, but we appreciate the operational needs on the Korean Peninsula. And I also believe it's the committee's expectation that General Brooks will testify before us as soon as it is feasible for him to return to Washington. In Asia, we are faced with two very different problem sets that will both require long-term integrated whole-of-government strategies. I am concerned that the administration has not developed a comprehensive strategy for the threat posed by North Korea or our long-term competition with China. Both problem sets are interdependent. For example, I firmly believe that if we preemptively attack North Korea, we will forfeit any ability to prevail in our long-term competition with China. And if we mishandle that competition, we will be poorly positioned to put the type of pressure on North Korea that is necessary to deter and contain the threat that the regime poses to the United States and our allies in the region. With regard to North Korea, the recent announcement that President Trump will be meeting with Kim Jong-un has led to cautious optimism about a path to a resolution in this crisis. Success in the proposed talks will require consistent strategic messaging, close coordination with our partners in China, and increased diplomatic capacity and empowerment for the experts at the State Department and other agencies. I am concerned that some of the critical plays necessary for effective negotiation are not in place. Since we are still lacking an ambassador for South Korea, the Secretary of State is in transition, and the top diplomat who had the most experience with the North Koreans recently resigned. Additionally, there should be significant pre-negotiations with the Republic of Korea, Japan, and China to make sure that we are presenting a comprehensive position that has buy-in from all of the relevant stakeholders. And I'm concerned that there's a very short window of time for all of this work to take place. We should all be realistic about the prospects for negotiations. Given North Korea's all-consuming drive for strategic nuclear capabilities and its history of failing to adhere to negotiated agreements, we can all agree that the likelihood of either near-term or long-term success for the talks is relatively low. And even in the event that North Korea agrees to verifiable denuclearization on terms that we can accept, there is a strong likelihood that a long-term deterrence and containment strategy will likely need to be in place for decades to come. And finally, it is critical that if negotiations are not successful, the administration does not pivot to preparing for a preemptive war with North Korea. I believe there is growing agreement that war is not an acceptable alternative to sustaining pressure on North Korea, preventing proliferation, and deterring aggression. The talks should be seen as an opportunity to curtail the regime's nuclear missile programs while still maintaining the maximum pressure campaign. Admiral Harris, I'm looking forward to hearing your views on this latest development and the implications for U.S. national security and the security of our allies in the Pacific region. China is the largest economic, military, and global competitor that we face. It is critical that this administration develop a comprehensive strategy that focuses on all these areas of competition. First and foremost, the U.S. needs a better global messaging campaign to counter Chinese influence in the region. For years, China has been circulating a narrative that the West is in decline and that the economic future lies with China. Our consistent response must be that we are committed to the Asia-Pacific region, that we will stand with our allies and partners to counter Chinese aggression, and that we will continue to promote a shared vision of strong economies, vibrant civil societies, and open democracies. In the end, it is that vision and the human rights that we champion that will ensure American success in the region. China has not demonstrated a willingness to be a responsible global leader. The U.S. should ensure that international law is followed. Our contention with China is not over who owns the South China Sea, but over who has access to it. To that end, we must enable and assist our partners and allies in the region, especially Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore, in defending their own sovereignty and maritime rights and provide them with economic alternatives to China. China is using state wealth and productive capacity to target key companies and entire industrial sectors in the United States to gain economic dominance. Even wise tax, regulatory, and trade policies would not be sufficient to overcome this mercantilist strategy. We must invest more in research and development, workforce development, and training, and correct lagging private investment in American manufacturing. We must also improve our own defense against the theft of our intellectual property and technology. Only recently have we come to fully understand some of our own vulnerabilities. Admiral Harris, I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony and how you view our long-term competition from China as the commander of the Pacific Command. I'm interested in hearing about all these issues and much more. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Admiral Harris, you are recognized for your opening statement, and then we'll have questions from the chair.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe and Ranking Member Reed and distinguished members. It's an honor for me to appear again before this committee for what is likely my last posture hearing to you all. I do regret, as the Senator said, that I'm not here with my usual testimony battle buddy, U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Vince Brooks, but I think you'll all agree that he's where he's needed most right now on the Korean Peninsula. General Brooks and I extend our thoughts and prayers to Chairman McCain and his family as he continues his tough health fight. There are many things to talk about since my last testimony before you 11 months ago, but I want to start by thanking the Congress for your action last month. I'm grateful for your bipartisan efforts to raise the budget caps for FY18 and FY19, and I'm optimistic that Congress will resource the FY18 NDAA in the coming weeks. I and many others have regularly highlighted the negative impacts that sequestration and the Budget Control Act have leveled against the military, so I would ask Congress to make these bipartisan measures permanent and end sequestration for good. One of the principal problems that we face in the region is overcoming the perception that the United States is a declining or disinterested power. A fully resourced defense budget leading into long-term budget stability will send a strong signal to our allies and partners and all potential adversaries that the U.S. is fully committed to preserving a free and open order in the Indo-Pacific. As your Pacom commander, I have the tremendous honor of leading approximately 375,000 soldiers, sailors, Marines, Airmen, Coast Guardsmen, and DoD civilians standing watch for the largest and most diverse geographic command. These men and women, as well as their families, fill me with pride in their hard work and devotion to duty. I'm humbled to serve alongside them. The U.S. has an enduring national interest in the Indo-Pacific, and as I stated last year, I believe America's security and economic prosperity are indelibly linked to this critical region, which remains at a precarious crossroad where tangible opportunity meets significant challenge. Here we face a security environment more complex and volatile than any we have experienced in recent memory. Senator Reed, I join you in being encouraged by recent developments on the Korean Peninsula and the possibility of a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. But North Korea remains our most urgent security threat in the region. Pacom will continue to fully support the President's maximum pressure campaign and be ready to respond with our allies and partners to the full range of contingency scenarios. This past year has seen rapid and comprehensive improvement in North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear capabilities, despite broad international condemnation and the imposition of additional United Nations Security Council resolutions. This includes the detonation of its largest nuclear device, first ever launches of 2 different intercontinental ballistic missiles, and 6 launches of an intermediate-range ballistic missile, all of which Pyongyang emphatically states will target the United States, including Guam. While some might dispute both the reliability and quantity of the North's strategic weapons, it is indisputable that KGU is rapidly closing the gap between rhetoric and capability. The Republic of Korea and Japan have been living under the shadow of North Korea's threats for years. Now that shadow looms over the American homeland. Meanwhile, China is leveraging military modernization, influence operations, and predatory economics to coerce neighboring countries to reorder the Indo-Pacific to their advantage. While some view China's actions in the East and South China Seas as opportunistic, I do not. I view them as coordinated, methodical, and strategic, using their military and economic power to erode their free and open international order. China's aggression in the South China Sea moves along unabated, despite the Permanent Court of Arbitration's tribunal ruling that invalidated China's 9-line claim on unprecedented land reclamation in 2016. And China is attempting to assert de facto sovereignty over disputed maritime features by further militarizing its man-made bases to this very day. China's impressive military buildup could soon challenge the United States across almost every domain. Key advancements include fielding significant improvements in missile systems, developing fifth-generation fighter capabilities, and growing the size and capability of the Chinese Navy, to include their first overseas base in the port of Djibouti. They are also heavily investing in the next wave of military technologies, including hypersonic missiles, advanced space and cyber capabilities, and artificial intelligence. If the U.S. does not keep pace, Pacom will struggle to compete with the People's Liberation Army on future battlefields. China's ongoing military buildup, advancement, and modernization are core elements of their strategy to supplant the United States as a security partner of choice for countries in the Indo-Pacific. China also holds global ambitions. But don't take my word for it. Just listen to what China says itself. At the 19th Party Congress, President Xi stated that he wanted China to develop a world-class military and become the global leader in terms of composite national strength and international influence. Ladies and gentlemen, China's intent is crystal clear, and we ignore it at our peril. These types of aspirational goals could be appropriate for a nation of China's stature, but judging by China's regional behavior, I'm concerned China will now work to undermine the rules-based international order, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but on a global scale as China expands its presence in Central Asia, the Arctic, Africa, South America, and Europe. This increasingly competitive environment necessitates continued dialogue between the United States and China and our militaries to improve understanding and reduce risk. For Pacom, my goal remains to convince China that its best future comes from peaceful cooperation and meaningful participation in the current free and open international order and honoring its international commitments. After all, the Chinese economic miracle could not have happened without the rules-based order the region has long supported. But I've also been loud and clear that we won't allow the shared domains to be closed down unilaterally, so we'll cooperate where we can, but remain ready to confront where we must. Now on to Russia. Russian operations and engagements throughout the Indo-Pacific continue to rise, both to advance their own strategic interests and to undermine ours. Russia intends to impose additional costs on the U.S. whenever and wherever possible by playing the role of spoiler, especially with respect to North Korea. Russia also sees economic opportunities to not only build markets for energy exports, but also to build, or in some cases rebuild, arms sales relationships in the region. Of particular note are Russian efforts to build presence and influence in the high north. Russia has more bases north of the Arctic Circle than all other countries combined, and is building more with distinctly military capabilities. In the Pacom region, one event dominated the counterterrorism fight in 2017, the siege by ISIS of the Philippine city of Marawi, and the city's recapture by Philippine security forces. This was symbolic of the largest struggle against violent extremism that we saw in Iraq and Syria and Africa. and now sea in South and Southeast Asia. Marawi underscores two important themes with regard to defeating ISIS in the Indo-Pacific. First, localized threats can quickly transform into international causes. An early effective response is vital to control the fight and own the narrative. Second, counterterrorism operations are extremely challenging, and most regional forces are poorly equipped for such fights. Our engagement strategy and capacity-building efforts have remained and will continue to remain focused on enabling regional counterterrorism forces to win whatever fights they face. Through multinational collaboration, we can eliminate ISIS before it spreads further in the area. Every day, our allies and partners join us in addressing these global challenges to defend freedom, deter war, and maintain the rules which underwrite a free and open Indo-Pacific. These mutually beneficial alliances and partnerships provide a durable, asymmetric strategic advantage that no competitor or rival can match. In the Indo-Pacific, our alliance with Australia continues to anchor peace and stability in the region with increased collaboration in counterterrorism, space, cyber, integrated air and missile defense, and regional capacity building. Our alliance with South Korea is ironclad, and our alliance with Japan has never been stronger. The attack on Marawi City served as a reminder of the value of our alliance to Philippine security and stability, and we've reinvigorated our alliance with Thailand through continued engagement with military leadership to promote regional security and healthy civil-military relations. We've also advanced our partnerships with India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and many others who are dedicated to the principles of long-standing, customary international law. While U.S. interests in the Indo-Pacific are real and enduring, the growing challenges to our interests are equally real and cannot be overstated. In order to deter conflict initiated by revisionist powers, rogue states, and transnational threats, we must continue to develop, acquire, and field advanced capabilities. Our evolving force posture must decrease our vulnerabilities, increase our resilience, and reassure our allies and partners. America's resolve is strong, and it's imperative that we continue to show our commitment to the region in the years to come. I ask this committee to continue its support for these future capabilities that maintain our edge and prevent would-be challengers from gaining the upper hand. Based on your bipartisan efforts last month, I'm excited about the path ahead. Thank you for your enduring support to the Pacom team and our families who live and work in the Indo-Pacific, a region critical to America's future. And I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. It was an excellent opening statement. Since we started the NDS as being the 2-3 approach, the two, of course, is China and Russia. And in the changes, and I've commented in my opening statement that when Senator Ernst and Senator Sullivan, Senator Rounds and I were over there and with you and then on through that area, it was very disturbing. During the trip, we came to the conclusion that our allies are worried about the pace of China, which is more evident, more visible than anything that we're doing. A key topic of discussion was China's build-up militarization in the South China Sea. In fact, over 3,200 acres have now been, they call it reclamation. I don't call it reclamation because there's nothing to reclaim. It's creation of new land. There's no law, they don't have the legal authority to do the things they're doing, but they're doing them anyway. And that's gotten everyone's attention. And these reclaimed lands are up to over 3,000 acres now, and they have just a shocking amount of military equipment there, and it's very disturbing. It's increased its military activities in the sea to bolster its territorial claims there, despite U.S. and international efforts to maintain freedom of navigation. That's a serious problem. If you look at the location of these islands, it's right in the navigation problems, creating problems potentially for us. It's also increased the pace of the military activities. And the Trump administration's national defense strategy, as I mentioned, places an emphasis on improving our ability to expand the competitive space against China. Now, the thing that disturbed us, and I think I speak for all 5 of us who were over there just 2 weeks ago, is that our allies are actually having a hard time choosing between China and us because of the visibility of what they're doing. And I'm talking about allies that I mentioned in my opening statement. We talked to the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and they all seem to be divided between the leadership. Their secretaries or ministers of defense and their foreign ministers are each taking a different side. So that was awakening to us to see that happen. So starting with China on the, I've just asked you the question. You've covered it pretty well. You talked about China's intent is clear. Well, let me ask you, do you consider China's buildup in that area as a direct threat to the United States and its allies?
Senator, I do believe that China's actions and what they've done in the South China Sea does threaten our position there. I think they're reaching a point of positional advantage in the South China Sea, and if it comes to a conflict, we'll have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I do believe that China gains when we don't call them out publicly, and it's important that we maintain that public criticism of China. Now, I've talked in the past that we should compliment China and thank them for the things that they are doing in the international space that's good for the order. Things like counter-piracy operations, their work to help the effort to remove chemical weapons from Syria, and on and on. These are positive things, and most recently their work in the UN sanctions regime against North Korea. We should thank them for that and appreciate that.
Yeah, and I understand that.
But at the same time, we should hold them accountable for the things they're doing that are provocative and aggressive to their neighbors and to us. We do have to counter the perception, as I mentioned in my comments, that the U.S. is either a declining power, which I don't believe, or a disinterested power, which I also don't believe. But that is the perception, and we must work to counter that.
Well, I know that's perception because we were there and we heard that articulated, and there's no doubt what their feelings are. Just before I run out of time, I want to mention North Korea, and of course Russia is the threat, but North Korea is something that is a changing scene. We had a hearing last week in this chamber of our intel. We had the DIA and the CIA here, and we talked about this in some depth, and I just disagreed with them. I've never disagreed with Dan Coates in my life until last week. But when he asked the question, do you really think that this recent communication from UN to our president was one that we cannot depend on having any results? And they both said, no, we've gone through this drill before. To me, it's different this time. We had a very direct, harsh response from our president to Kim Jong-un when he made the statement about having the button and I'll press it and all that. And it was immediately after that response that North Korea communicated with South Korea and said, we want to join in now with the Winter Olympics. And then, of course, they came out with this statement. And I can't help but think, look, his dad, Un's dad, never had the bargaining chip that he has now. The fact that November the 28th, that they sent something over that can reach the United States, that's something that he can use. People argue, well, it didn't have a payload. It wouldn't perform that well with a payload. That doesn't give me any comfort at all. They say it doesn't have the re-entry capability, but the fact that they can do that puts him in a position, I think, to be a negotiator. And is there anything further concerning the threat from UN that you want to share before I turn this over?
Sir, I'll just say that I do believe that the strength of the pressure campaign plan was a big part of bringing North Korea to the table, to the offer of a summit. Without the strength of the pressure campaign plan and its effectiveness so far, I don't think we would be where we are.
I appreciate that very much. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Admiral Harris, not only for your testimony, but for your service, particularly as you've indicated this might be your final meeting. You've served the Navy and the nation very well. Thank you, sir.
Final meeting with this committee, sir.
With this committee, of course. There are other committees, but we'll let them.
Downrange, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. North Korea. Part of our approach must be multilateral with all of our allies, including South Korea and Japan. Any insights on Japanese participation. The South Koreans, of course, initiated these talks and seem to be engaged, President Moon, but President Abe has his own problems in Japan. But also, are they on board? Are they going to be 100% with us on this?
I believe they will be, sir. I think that Japan is clearly an interested party in what happens on the Korean Peninsula and this summit that's coming up. But I believe that Japan will be supportive of the outcome, and they share our concerns about the trustworthiness of North Korea. So, you know, we in the past, in talking about other countries and stuff, you know, we tend to use the term trust but verify. In this case, I think it's distrust and verify. But I believe that that Japan will be with us as we go forward here.
And, you know, perhaps being overly optimistic, but if there is some type of an agreement, that would require years and years of intense verification, constant surveillance. So we would be making a huge, but I think appropriate investment in terms of following up any type of agreement with the kind of oversight and non-proliferation activities that would be essential.
I agree with you, Senator. I do believe that our position will remain a complete, verifiable denuclearization, irreversible denuclearization of the peninsula as we go into this. I think we can't be overly optimistic on outcomes. We'll just have to see where it goes if and when we have the summit.
And just two other questions. I presume, and I'll ask you to comment, that this would at its best be a stepwise process, that the likelihood of a total, complete agreement in one or two meetings is doubtful, that progress would be slow, that it would be concessions followed by further concessions, et cetera. Is that your view, Tim?
You know, I don't know, Senator. We've never been in a position where our president has met with a leader of North Korea ever, and so I don't have a way to predict the future. I just think that we have to go into this eyes wide open.
And just with respect to North Korea, finally, the great deal of the pressure has been generated economically by the Chinese participation. It's actually, they're getting better and better in terms of curtailing trade with North Korea. Do you sense any kind of pullback now based on other issues like trade policies or anything else that?
With regard to China? No, right now, Senator, as I mentioned earlier, I think that we should compliment China for the work that they're doing to enforce the sanctions that the United Nations has put in place. I'm encouraged by China's activities in this space with regard to North Korea. They have a vested interest in the outcome. And I've said before that I think China remains the key to a peaceful outcome on the Korean Peninsula, but China is not the key to all outcomes.
Now, with respect to China and our presence in the Pacific, the National Defense Strategy calls for a much more forward presence, denser positioning of platforms and personnel. That requires, obviously, the cooperation of the countries of the Asia area. Their trade relationships with China are increasing rather than decreasing. Would that make them hesitant to invite us in or support our efforts?
It could, because they have to weigh a continued relationship and alliance, in some cases alliance, certainly partnership in all cases with the United States, against the economic advantages of their relationships with China. But I do believe that the United States remains a security partner of choice. The work that you all have done to fund the budget for the next 2 years and stuff, I think that sends a strong signal of America's resilience and continuing interest in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific region. And that goes a long way. The National Defense Strategy acknowledges that we're in strategic competition with China. I think that alone serves notice to not only China, but to our friends, allies, and partners in the region.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Admiral. Last year, when you testified before the committee, you and I discussed Pacom's need for ISR. and I'm proud to represent Offutt Air Force Base and the 55th Wing, which provides support for that mission out of Kadena Air Base in Japan. Do you have enough ISR assets, including the RC-135s, to be able to meet the demands in your area of responsibility?
I do not, Senator.
Can you describe how you use the RC-135 in Pacom?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. We use the RC-35, the rivet joint, for all, not all, but for a large portion of our signals intelligence requirements throughout the Western Pacific, whether it's in the Northwestern Pacific focused on North Korea, or whether it's in the South China Sea area focused on China. But RC-135, the Air Force's RC-135 and the Navy's EP-3 are critical to signals intelligence collection against our potential adversaries and adversaries in the region.
You said you don't have enough. Is that because demand's increasing?
I don't have enough because there isn't enough to go around. And when you look at a fixed amount of ISR assets, and all of the combatant commanders have requirements, and then those requirements have to be apportioned by some entity, and that entity is the Joint Staff through the Global Force Management process. I think all the combatant commanders would tell you that none of us have all that we want.
Do you see demand increasing?
I do see demand increasing clearly.
North Korea's pursued an aggressive schedule of nuclear testing, and my understanding is that the WC-135s operating in Pacom provide valuable intelligence on those activities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain how that information helps inform your decision-making with regard to forces in the area of your responsibility?
The WC-135 is a service-retained asset that I have to ask for. And when I ask for it, I always get it, which is a good thing. And WC-135 helps me understand the nature of North Korea's nuclear testing.
You mentioned in your testimony the fact that we risk losing the dominance of the air domain that we've enjoyed for decades in the Pacific. And both China and Russia are investing heavily in the A2AD and new fifth-generation fighters and are rapidly closing the gap. Do you believe that we still have that air superiority in the region?
I do believe we have that air superiority. I think it's unquestioned now, but I can see a path where it might not be unless we continue to resource it.
Under what scenarios do you believe that we risk losing that superiority and really the freedom of access that we have?
If we don't overturn the Budget Control Act, if sequestration is the law of the land, remains the law of the land, and we fail to resource our requirements in air superiority, then Chinese development will continue apace, and there'll be a timeline, a time at which those lines cross, and we'll lose our air superiority. Today, I believe we have it. I think the Congress's actions, as evidenced by the bipartisan agreement last month, I think that sends a strong signal and will help us maintain that advantage, at least through FY19.
When you talk about the advances that the Chinese are having, are you speaking of the technologies that
I'm speaking
increasing?
both the technologies in terms of Chinese development of fifth-generation fighters and the weight of their numbers alone. You know, I've often said that quantity has a quality all its own, and so while the U.S. Equipment and personnel in terms of quality far exceeds that of any of our competitors or potential competitors, quantity has a quality all its own.
Can you speak to any certain technologies that you believe might seriously threaten us?
I believe China's development and research into hypersonic glide weapons is one of those technologies that they're working on that could threaten us significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Admiral, for being here once again. Admiral Harris, I'd like to ask you about Australia. Australia, as you're well aware, has been a very consistent U.S. ally for decades. But a recent article in Foreign Affairs discusses how China interferes in Australia, working covertly to manipulate the Australian political system by access and influence and stealing research and intellectual property to aid China's military. Australia is also very closely linked economically to China, with about a third of their exports going to China as well. But despite these very strong economic ties, Australia has taken steps to resist China's influence with public warnings that have been amplified by the press, including investigations into links between major political donors in Australia and the Chinese Communist government. Admiral Harris, could you elaborate a little bit on what you are seeing in Australia and their work, and are there perhaps lessons that we should learn as a country based on Australia's experience with China?
Senator Shirley, I was in Australia last week as a part of my counterpart visit with the Chief of Defense there, Air Chief Marshal Benskin. I believe that Australia is one of our strongest allies. They have been with us for literally 100 years. This year is a 100th anniversary of the first time American troops fought under a foreign leader, and that was General John Monash in 1918 in World War I. So I have no doubt, there's no question about the solidness and strength of the American-Australian alliance. Specific to your questions, about Chinese influence, it is real in Australia. There is a book out that complements the article that you spoke about called Silent Invasion, and it talks about malign Chinese influence in Australia. I think Australia understands that, they get it, and they're going after it.
Well, we should and follow how they are doing. It's successful, you believe? Are there some lessons there for us?
I believe there are lessons to be learned in the Australian case that are applicable to our situation.
Right. Thank you, Admiral. Admiral, in your written testimony, you talk about the Communist Party General Secretary promising military development that would remain a national priority in China, and that he pledges to modernize by 2035 and achieve, quote, world-class status by 2049. You go on to say that you believe that that they will achieve it well before those kinds of deadlines. So talk a little bit about that progress, and perhaps are there any benchmarks that we should look at to measure that progress, and ones that should raise particular alarms to us?
Yeah. So I believe the development of hypersonic weapons is a benchmark. I think the development of China's fifth-generation fighter aircraft is another benchmark. They are beginning to field fifth-generation fighters now, the J-20. And they're developing the J-31. So I think these are things that we should watch carefully. As we watch them, observe them militarize their bases in the South China Sea, they're doing the vertical improvements on them now, and they're turning these islands that they've built into military bases clearly. So I think we have to keep our eyes on that. I think the new move politically inside China is already a benchmark. And by that I mean their decision to remove the term limits that has been in place in China since Deng Xiaoping became the leader there, and to have a president for life. I view that with concern. I mean, there is a possibility that in 2049, the centennial of the modern People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping could be the president then, and I think that we should view that with concern. And the kind of country, the kind of nation that China could be, we're getting a sense of that now with this move to remove term limits for its leader.
So given these challenges, and we've talked about many of them, and there'll be many more challenges we'll talk about during this hearing, you also mentioned in your opening comments that we need to figure out a way to help China become a peaceful, cooperative partner with the United States. What sort of things can we do to hopefully get to that point?
Well, I do believe that we should continue to encourage China to be a peaceful, responsible partner, but we shouldn't do that through rose-colored glasses. Our experience in the past has been that or our hope in the past, rather, has been that if we bring China into organizations like the World Trade Organization and include China in our military exercises and the like, that somehow China will become like us being not the United States only, but our democratic friends, allies, and partners. And I think the expectation is, the reality is that that's simply not true. China has taken advantage of our openness with China to continue on the path that they've always been on. And we're seeing that play out now in 2018. Certainly over the next 20 years or so, it'll be of concern to us. But that shouldn't obviate the need to try. But we should do so with eyes wide open.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Cotton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Admiral Harris, for your testimony, once again, for your service. I want to speak about critical munitions, specifically ammunition. For all the fancy weapons we have in our military, if you don't have enough rounds, then you don't have much. The U.S. Navy has identified a number of shortfalls and unfunded priorities going forward in this area, including LRASM, Harpoon Block 2, AIM-96, and Mark 48. What would a shortfall of these munitions mean for you in the Pacom area of operations?
Ultimately, Senator, depending on the size of the shortfall, ultimately it could mean we lose in war. I mean, you got to have the munitions to beat the enemy.
Yeah. So it's safe to say then that given the budget deal we reached last month and the additional funding for our military, that if this committee and this Congress can find more money for those munitions, that's something you would support?
The budget deal is very much appreciated, Senator. Thank you very much for that.
But you would support additional funding for those critical munitions?
I would.
Thank you. One kind of munition this country lacks, only country in the world that lacks it now, is a ground-launched intermediate-range cruise missile because of the INF treaty. Russia is not supposed to have those. We now know that Russia does because they've been cheating on that treaty. Last year, we discussed this topic, and you stated, quote, "The aspects of the INF treaty that limit our ability to counter Chinese and other countries' land-based missiles, I think, is problematic," end quote. Over the last year, China has continued to produce the DF-21, the DF-26 missiles, so I think it's safe to assume that those challenges have continued to increase. If this country were no longer a part of the INF treaty and we could produce ground-launched intermediate-range cruise missiles, could you explain what that would do to the military balance of power in the Pacom area of operations?
I think that we are at a disadvantage with regard to China today in the sense that China has ground-based ballistic missiles that threaten our basing in the Western Pacific and our ships. They have ground-based ballistic anti-ship missiles. And we have nothing, we have no ground-based capability that can threaten China because of, among other things, our rigid adherence, and rightfully so, to the treaty that we signed on to, the INF treaty. That said, there are good aspects of INF, and that is the nuclear piece of it, which we also adhere to, and I think that's important. So I'm not calling for us to pull out of the INF. I am asking and suggesting, rather, that we consider ways to work within the INF regime to overcome these shortfalls that are presented to us by China. Because INF, as you know, only affects us and Russia and the successor republics from the Soviet Union. It does not include China. China is not a signatory to it. We can't reasonably expect, nor should we expect that China adhere to a treaty that they're not a signatory to. But it puts us at a disadvantage in the Western Pacific. So we could do anything from one extreme to pull out to the other extreme to do nothing. And I think we should look at ways to maximize our operational flexibility with regards to the advantage that China has over us in terms of ground-based ballistic missiles.
Thank you. One final question about the impact of the recent sanctions legislation this Congress passed, designed primarily with Russia in mind, and specifically countries that continue to use Russian military hardware and systems. I supported that legislation. I still do. But I do have some concerns about potential unintended consequences among countries that, for various historical reasons, still have Russian hardware, and it'd be hard to avoid Russian hardware. Is that an area of concern in Pacom?
It is, Senator, and we're speaking here about the CATSA legislation. Secretary Mattis has sent a letter, it's classified in its entirety, to you all, asking for some relief from CATSA. I can't get into the specifics of the letter because of its classification, but my own opinion is that countries like India, where we've made a key partner. I believe that India is a great strategic opportunity for the United States. 70% of their military hardware is Russian in origin. You can't expect India to go cold turkey on that. I think we ought to look at ways to have a glide path so that we can continue to trade in arms with India. So CATSA affects that, and I hope that we can, achieve some relief for the rigidity that's in that legislation.
Thank you. And your point, and I assume Secretary Mattis's point in his classified letter, is that you have a country like India that's a close ally and growing ever closer, but for historical reasons going back decades, they just rely on a lot of Russian equipment, and it would really impair them and therefore our relationship with them to try to ask them to go cold turkey immediately.
You are correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. I know you said this is the last time you'll appear in front of the Armed Services Committee, but I know you'll have a hearing coming up soon in the Foreign Relations Committee, so you'll get to continue to tell the noble lie that it's a pleasure to be in front of Congress again today. But most importantly, I know that I and probably most members of this committee will look forward to supporting your nomination to be our ambassador to Australia, and I'm very grateful you're willing to continue to serve in a new capacity. Thank you, Admiral Harris.
That's good. Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several things you've mentioned today. You talked about China's activities in the South China Sea, and you also talked about Russian activities in the Arctic. In your view, would it be in the United States national security interest for us to be signatories of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea?
In my opinion, Senator, has not changed over the past decade or so. I'm an advocate of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
And in fact, we're relegating ourselves to the sidelines as these disputes about continental shelf and relationships are being adjudicated.
I believe that the UNCLOS gives Russia the potential to, quote unquote, own almost half of the Arctic Circle, and we will not have that opportunity because we're not a signatory to UNCLOS.
We won't be in the discussion.
That is correct.
Thank you. There's a great deal of discussion about a potential summit meeting between our president and Kim Jong-un. What, in your view, would Kim Jong-un want to get out of these discussions? In other words, number one, is it realistic that he would put his nuclearization on the table? And number two, if he did so, what would he want in return?
Senator, I don't know what Kim Jong-un actually wants out of the summit, but I do believe that in a general sense, Kim Jong-un seeks reunification of the Korean Peninsula under his leadership. He seeks respect and status that nuclear weapons gives him, and he seeks security, which he believes the nuclear weapons give him.
What you said at the beginning was very important, reunification of the Korean Peninsula. What would be the impact on his calculus if we removed our troops from and various security arrangements from South Korea?
I believe he would do a victory dance.
In Seoul, probably.
I think he'd be a happy man if we abrogated our alliance with South Korea and with Japan.
Let's talk about China for a minute. I thought for a long time that China's primary intention was commercial and regional hegemony, but their military buildup it seems to me, indicates greater ambitions. What's your view of China's ultimate goal here? And then I'll ask a second question about President Xi's ascension.
Yes, sir. I agree with you that I believe that China seeks regional hegemony, and that means pushing the United States out of the Indo-Pacific region.
Do you think they have greater ambitions? They've now built a military base in Djibouti.
I do. I think that, you know, as I said in my opening statement, just take them at their word, and they seek to be a global military and a global force. That of itself is not a bad thing. A country with great economic power ought to be able to buy and build the military that they choose, but it's how they go about it that's of concern. I think their actions speak for themselves, and their provocative nature and their aggressive nature, and how they deal with their neighbors. We see that play out in India. We see that play out in the Indo-Pacific on a daily basis.
And as we see them develop this capability, my concern is right now they may not have the will to be an aggressive territorial nation, but if they develop the capability, the will could change overnight.
I believe they do have the will. They don't have the capability.
But they're building the capability.
They're clearly building to that capability.
And I read recently, one commentator said they thought the greatest geopolitical development of recent years was President Xi's ascension to unlimited length in terms of his authority. How do you see that? Long term, do you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage?
I don't know, to be honest with you, Senator. There hasn't, you know, we haven't seen it play out. We just know the fact of it. I'm concerned about it. I mean, I think countries, at least historically, that choose presidents for life, it doesn't end well for their own people. But I don't know how it will play out. But it's something we must watch closely to see how it goes.
Finally, you mentioned in your earlier comments Russia's role in North Korea. I think you used the term spoiler. What do you see Russia? Are they just going to, my father used to use the term officious intermeddler, are they going to just try to mess things up?
I do believe they're trying to mess things up. I think they'll meddle. I believe that if the sanctions that are put in place over North Korea are too hard on North Korea, including the sanctions that China are following, I believe that Russia will seek to relieve the pressure of the sanctions regime and the pressure campaign plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Perdue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral, you called this out about President Xi Jinping's move. In '82, Deng Xiaoping put term limits in after the excesses of Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution. We saw 30 years of economic development. Today, we have a leader for life in China. I see that development along with the Belt and Road strategy that you so eloquently have called out over the last year as two major initiatives that I think give us a hint at their long-term strategy. And it looks like if you look at the global map, a new world order could be in mind here between Europe, Asia, and Africa. In Africa alone, they've got over 20 ports that they've invested in and developed. Today, they have $200 billion in loans in Asia, the Pacific, Africa, and Europe. They've promised over $1.2 trillion of future loans. That's 10 times the size of the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Asia and Europe earlier or in the middle part of last century. Sir, my concern is that we already see their intent. The Marshall Plan was not loans primarily. It was philanthropy. This investment, the $1.2 trillion that's coming, is mostly in the form of loans. And in Africa, as an example, they're loaning money into these ports and the ports development. Sri Lanka, we already have an example where some of those loans went bad, and China foreclosed, and now China for 99 years has a port in Sri Lanka. In addition to Djibouti, and in addition to what they're doing in the Belt and Road strategy, can you tie together that for us, the danger it has to the world order we enjoy today, where representative democracies in the free world dominate the cultural political situation? Do you see it this way, and are you calling that out for us to think about this in a longer-term perspective regarding to what we see evidence of right now in terms of the China strategy with the Belt and Road and also with President Xi Jinping's change to a lifetime leader?
Senator, I do see it that way. As I said earlier, I do believe that for those of us, myself included, who wonder the kind of country that China will be in 2049, I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing that play out with this move toward a leader for life. We're seeing it play out in OBOR, One Belt, One Road, or the Belt Road Initiative, which is not only about development, which of itself is a good, but it's not about development as much as it is about malign influence throughout the region, making China the security partner of choice and pushing the United States and our friends, allies, and partners out of the region. So I think it has a strategic impact beyond simple development. China announced a few weeks ago the Polar Silk Road, and that's a clear indication that China views the Arctic as a sphere of influence for them. There are some Chinese scholars that would actually suggest that the resources in the Arctic, a portion of those resources should be China's because they have a fifth of the world's population. So I think we should look at that carefully, consider what that means in the long term. China is putting their money where their mouth is. They have 4 icebreakers and building to a 5th. I think that's significant. You know, why would a country have that kind of capability if it has no border on the Arctic or Antarctic? Because they're interested in the resources that are there, because they've called that out and named it the Polar Silk Road.
Thank you, sir. Following up on that, the committee took the lead recently in establishing the Southeast Asia Maritime Security Initiative in the FY16 NDAA to support maritime domain awareness capabilities of our partners and allies confronting sovereignty challenges in the South China Sea. You've called out the dangers of the South China Sea. You talk about thousands of acres of reclaimed property there used primarily for military use. This program, the Southeast Asia Maritime Security Initiative, is now ramping up with $98 million requested in the FY19 budget. Would you please give us your assessment of the strategic importance of the Maritime Security Initiative? And in your view, what signal would it send if this initiative did not receive full funding?
Senator, I'm a big believer in the Maritime Security Initiative. It's $425 million across 5 years. It's not a lot of money. But we have put the $190 million or so over the past 3 years, including this year, to good use. We've put it to use to improve maritime domain awareness. And the Maritime Security Initiative affects our Southeast Asian partners, principally Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand, and Vietnam. And we're using this funding to improve their maritime domain awareness so they can understand what's happening in their water space. We're using it to improve things like the Sulu Sea Initiative, which goes after sea crime, kidnap for ransom, and piracy in the Sulu Sea and the Gulf of Thailand area. These are important things that signal our interest and our willingness to help our friends and allies and partners that are affected by the Maritime Security Initiative. To cut that funding or to pull us out of it would send the wrong signal at the wrong time, in my opinion.
Thank you, Admiral. And I just want to echo the voices of my colleagues in thanking you for your decades of service and for your willingness to continue that service in Australia. It's a very critical post, as you well know, as we heard earlier in question. And I just thank God for your career and your help for the United States of America. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Perdue. We all agree with that. Senator Rono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Harris, this being your last testimony before this committee, I certainly join my colleagues in thanking you for your distinguished service throughout your career, and especially your last 2 tours in Hawaii as Commander of Pacific Fleet and your current assignment as a Pacific Commander, Pacom Commander. And we in Hawaii will miss you and your wife, Bruni, who I also had the privilege of getting to know, for your leadership and your participation in our support of the community in Hawaii. And of course, we wish you well as you move into your next chapter of life, and you and Bruni will always be a part of our Hawaii Ohana. There's no question that we're now in a period of great power competition with China and Russia, and I think China's goal is to become a global military and economic power. And as you say, it's how they go about it that's concerning. They do not play fair. And I'm glad that you are very clear in your support for the United States signing on to UNCLOS. And there might have been a time when our country not being a signatory to UNCLOS maybe didn't matter that much, but now with global warming and climate change, places like the Arctic Circle become very attractive to countries such as Russia. And as you note, there is a potential that Russia will control almost 1/2 of the Arctic Circle. So I would say that it is time for our Congress to visit the issue of signing on to UNCLOS, and we should sign on. In past hearings, you and I have discussed the importance of the whole-of-government approach to what we do, and concerns with the administration's cuts to the State Department and Treasury, along with the effects that these cuts would have on foreign diplomacy, your mission, and the ability to combat our adversaries in the Pacific region. And in your testimony, you specify that countering violent extremism in the Indo-Pacific requires close collaboration with U.S. government interagency partners, such as the Department of State, Treasury, the FBI, USAID, and other intel agencies. Can you discuss briefly the importance of this whole-of-government approach to accomplish Pacom's mission, and what are the effects of cuts to the State Department and Treasury personnel on your mission? How do these cuts impact your ability to counter threats in the Indo-Pacific region?
Thank you, Senator. I do believe that the challenges that we face are not solely military challenges, even though I'm a military officer and in charge of a geographic combatant command. I believe that a strong State Department, complemented by a strong Defense Department, and diplomats complemented by military personnel, is the key to a strong American position. A weak State Department funded in terms of funding, a weak State Department means you have to have a stronger Defense Department. And I think it would be so much better to have both funded to the level they should be funded.
So a 26% cut to the State Department would be concerning to you in terms of your ability to carry out your mission?
As I understand the State Department, it would be. But I suppose that, you know, I mean, the devil's in the details. It depends on how it's cut, what's cut, and so on. But generally speaking, I think we need a fully funded State Department complemented by a fully funded Defense Department to project American power correctly.
And as we see what's going on with North Korea, it is not helpful at all. I believe you have said that we should have an ambassador to South Korea appointed.
I don't believe I've said that per se.
Or others have said. Do you join that?
I'm pleased with Consul, with the Chargé, rather, Mark Napper. I think he's doing a great job. And he works very closely with General Vince Brooks. And I think our Korean allies know who to turn to for questions they have, whether they're diplomatic questions or military questions.
And yet we don't have an ambassador to South Korea, and also the envoy to South Korea from the State Department also left. So these are not helpful conditions. As you know, the U.S., Japan, India, and Australia have a quadrilateral regional cooperation supporting a free and open Indochina region. Can you discuss briefly the importance and impact of the quadrilateral regional cooperation to the U.S., its allies, and on your Pacom mission?
I believe that the Quad is important. I think these are Japan, United States, Australia, and India form a naturally grouping, if you will, a natural grouping of democracies to face the challenges that are out there in the region. So I'm pleased with the Quad. I don't think the Quad has to be 4. I mean, I think the Big Ten has 12 teams and the Big 12 has 14 teams. So I don't think we're obligated to the number 4, but the nature of it, the sense of it is that these are democracies that are linked in terms of values and in military relationships, and we should advocate for this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do want to just mention, because I know Senator Hirono's mentioned this, Senator Warren, you know, I think there's this comes up in the armed services hearings a lot lately, is this concern about not getting enough nominees out to the State Department, to the Department of Defense, from the White House, from the administration. I think they could do a better job, but I do think that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle then don't talk about the next issue, which is how there's unprecedented, historically unprecedented blocking of nominees. So my colleagues, they can't have it both ways. We'll encourage the administration, get more people out, a South Korean ambassador, assistant secretaries of state and defense, but my colleagues on the other side of the aisle can't then just say, now we're going to take 30 hours for every nominee that comes before the Senate. It's not, you can't have it both ways. So let's work on getting nominees, and then you guys can help us stop the historic obstruction of these nominees. I think that would be a good compromise, and I'm certainly ready to do that. I know that's not your issue, Admiral, although it might be your issue when you're nominated to be ambassador to Australia. I certainly hope my colleagues don't block you for 7 months. I think the German ambassador has been blocked for months now, and few people on the other side want to talk about that. Admiral, I want to show you a slide. It's I think you have a copy, and it's right there on that chart. But it's the evolution of how China has been talking about the South China Sea militarization. As you see there in September in the Rose Garden with President Obama, Xi Jinping essentially said, we're not going to militarize. So that's standing next to the President of the United States. And then slowly but surely, they've come out and with the most recent Global Times Voice of China, essentially saying, hey, we're going to be a big, strong military power. Yeah, maybe we will. So how do you interpret that evolution? And, I don't think it's very useful to have the leader of a country standing next to the leader of our country saying they're not going to do something when, do you think in 2015 the master plan was to do it, even though they said they weren't?
I do believe that in 2015, China had a plan to militarize the South China Sea. I don't think this is a pretty good graphic. There's no interpretation needed here. Clearly, China is militarizing the South China Sea.
And in terms of their, I very much appreciated your policy statement, which is we're going to cooperate where we can, but confront. I think sometimes China has come out and said, well, we were forced to do this because you're running freedom of navigation operations in that region. How long have we been running fawn ops in the South China Sea as a U.S. Navy?
Senator, as a policy item, freedom of navigation operations, we've been doing those for decades. The U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force have conducted operations in and above the South China Sea for even longer periods of time. We have been a presence, we in the United States, we have been a presence in the Western Pacific for over 70 years.
And your point about how, in some ways, that was key to the rise of China because keeping sea lanes open has helped the international order, and no country's benefited more from that than China. I think it's a really important one. Let me next go to, you mentioned the Polar Silk Road, and I'd just like to, note that we're trying, right now Russia has 40 icebreakers, and they're building 13 more. China has 4, and you say they're building a 5th. We have 2, and 1 is broken. And yet we're an Arctic nation. We're an Arctic nation because of my state, and they're not. So what do you, again, think their intentions are there?
I believe their intentions are clear. They're interested, China is interested in the resources in the Arctic Circle. Russia is interested in the security aspects of the Arctic Circle. Russia is using UNCLOS to its advantage, and I think that we're at a disadvantage because we don't have the icebreakers and stuff that the other countries have. But I do want to acknowledge and thank the Congress for putting icebreaker in the 19 budget.
Well, that's progress, but we need to make a lot more progress. Let me ask one final question, Admiral. So I think we should acknowledge that China has actually been helpful with the administration's approach to North Korea. I think that they've done more than they ever have previously. I think we've made more progress on this maximum pressure campaign than previously done, including good work at the UN Security Council. Do you see China being helpful in the future on this? And what do you think their strategic calculation is with regard to North Korea, when so far they have moved pretty far, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that. What do you anticipate, particularly as we get to this moment where if the president's going to meet with Kim Jong-un, obviously there's going to be a lot of diplomatic focus and focus with regard to our allies and countries like China on the importance of this issue?
Senator, I believe in 2018 that China is probably, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I believe that China is probably as worried about the path that North Korea is on vis-a-vis its nuclear weapons as we are. I think in the past, China viewed North Korea as a way to pressure the United States. And all of that entails. But today, I think what happened in 2017 and 2016 was a wake-up call for Beijing, and it made them realize what a danger North Korea poses, not just to the United States or South Korea or Japan, but a danger it poses to China, and the danger it poses to stability in the Indo-Pacific. So now they're helpful, and I appreciate that help. And as you say, we should compliment and acknowledge them for the work that they're doing.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admiral. Thank you for your many years of service. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to spend my limited time this morning on our national defense strategy. The Trump administration recently released its National Defense Strategy report, and the unclassified version says that, quote, long-term strategic competitions with China and Russia are the principal priorities for the Department of Defense. The strategy stresses the need to modernize existing equipment, invest in advanced capabilities, and enhance the readiness of the joint force for a high-end fight. Admiral, I know you've been focused on managing the challenge posed by China, but your area of responsibility also includes China's neighbor, North Korea. Many analysts estimate that a conflict on the Korean Peninsula could bog us down for years, degrading our equipment and potentially resulting in thousands of casualties, both to our allies and to our own troops. So let me ask, Admiral, what would be the impact of a long-term conflict on the Korean Peninsula on our ability to prepare for a high-end conflict like the kind described in the defense strategy?
Thank you, Senator. I do believe that a conflict on the Korean Peninsula will result in thousands of casualties. Yes. And I believe that China could be opportunistic in terms of what they do in their area if we were bogged down in Korea. But I don't believe that we should allow our concern or fear for what could happen with China detract us from our treaty obligations with South Korea and to defending our own homeland, which is the threat posed by North Korea.
I appreciate that, Admiral. I'm asking about the difficulties that are posed here. So let me just ask a different question related to this. Would we be able to maintain our technological investments to counter China if we were engaged in a sustained ground war in North Korea?
I think we would be able to do that.
You know, I was glad to see the President's renewed interest in diplomacy last week. I'm not sure if he recognizes the enormous complexity of these negotiations and the fact that a breakthrough may not occur overnight, but I think we should all be hoping for success because a ground war on the Korean Peninsula would be devastating to our long-term strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world. Admiral Harris, while I have you, and I still have 2 minutes left, I want to ask one other question. I know that you support CFIUS, which reviews acquisitions by foreign companies for threats to our national security, and you support reform to capture a wider range of transactions and technologies. particularly as they relate to China. You have made the point that China is blurring the lines between military and civilian activity and exploiting America's open system to gain access to sensitive technologies. I agree with you that we need to protect our most advanced technologies, but there are two sides to this coin. Our adversaries will be interested in stealing from us only as long as we continue to produce the most innovative science and technology in the world. And being at the top of that heap is not a guarantee, it is not a birthright, and in fact, right now China is also investing heavily in R&D, including in areas like physics, robotics, high-performance computing, nanoscience. So, Admiral, do you think that government investment in research and development helps maintain our military advantage, and would we improve our chances of maintaining technological superiority over China by increasing our R&D investments in advanced technologies?
I do. Senator, I'll also add that government investment can't be the only source of innovation in the United States, and it hasn't been in the past, nor should it be in the future. I'm a big supporter of what we colloquially call CFIUS 2.0. I wrote a letter to Senator Cornyn about FIRMA, the new law on this. I believe we have to be sensitive to our open society and what that does for our adversaries, how the advantages that it gives our adversaries. In terms of China, that's manifested in both technology and technological change, and in a Chinese acquisition of large tracts of land that are adjacent to our training and electronic ranges.
Yeah. Well, I do see this as both sides, and I think we're in agreement on this, that on the one hand, we've got to be very sensitive about what they're trying to steal from us, but on the other, we've got to continue and even, I believe, ratchet up our investments so that we maintain our technological superiority.
Absolutely. No argument from me on that.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tillis.
Good morning, Admiral Harris. It's good to see you again, and thank you for your service. I was thinking about you. I'm from North Carolina, so when I was filling out my bracket, I had to pick the Tar Heels to go all the way, but then I got another bracket so I could pick the Volunteers. So I want you to know that Tennessee's got a special place in my heart, and I know it does for you. Just two questions. One, there were some press reports about the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Treaty that you've expressed some concern over. At least there were some reports. Could you expand on that for the purposes of this committee?
The INF Treaty is an important piece of diplomacy. It was formed and signed in 1987 by Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev of the Soviet Union. It was the right treaty for that time when we were in a bipolar world. Today, we're not in a bipolar world, we're in a multipolar world. I think the restrictions that the INF Treaty places on us ought to be looked at, particularly when you consider that countries like China and Iran are not signatories to the treaty, and there's no obligation for them to follow any part of the treaty. We follow it to the letter because we're America, and we do what we sign on to do. As has been mentioned earlier, Russia has violated the treaty routinely for the last number of years. So I think there are aspects of the treaty that we ought to look at. The nuclear restrictions in the treaty, I think, are important and commendatory, and we should keep those in place. But the treaty also restricts our ability to deploy ground-based ballistic missiles that counter ballistic missiles that threaten us, our ships, and our bases from countries like China.
Thank you. You're going to be moving, and I hope you will be swiftly confirmed as ambassador to Australia. I'll be supporting your nomination. I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will let us get that done quickly. But one of I believe when we met with you in Pacom a couple of years ago, we talked a little bit about trade and how alliances with, how the economic alliances are pretty important. We know where TPP ended up, but what's your opinion on that side of the equation? When you go to Australia, for example, who would have been one of the TPP partners, what do you think we need to do down there at an economic level or a strategic level to make our military relationship stronger?
Senator, I was interested in the TPP when it was first postulated because of the security linkages that I saw the TPP affording us and our friends, allies, and partners that were also part of TPP when it was the TPP 12. I talked to some folks yesterday. You know, there are very few things that engender bipartisan support today. One of those was the pulling out of TPP. Both parties were opposed to it, and both candidates were opposed to it. That said, the other 11 countries that were involved in TPP, they went ahead and formed on their own TPP 11. And I think that if we can get a fair and equitable a trade pact with them, that we might want to consider getting into it. But I'm not a trade expert or an economics expert for that matter. You know, my theory in life has been to buy high, sell low, and it hasn't worked well for me. So here I am today, and I look at the security parts of it, though, and there are clearly advantages because it links us in the security space with these countries. There are aspects of the original TPP that included cybersecurity, intellectual property security, and that kind of stuff, which I thought was important, and it merited a deeper look. So I don't know where we're going to be with regard to TPP 11, whether we'll join it or not, but I think that it's an important grouping, and we'll have to look at it and see if there's a way that that we can achieve what the President seeks in terms of fair and equitable trade.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate your many years of service to the nation. I look forward to your continued service in the position as ambassador. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thank you very much. As you may know, last year's NDAA included a provision I authored requiring the White House to submit a report on North Korea strategy within 90 days. The report was supposed to include, among other components, a detailed roadmap that identifies U.S. objectives and a desired end state, a clear timeline, and an assessment of unilateral and multilateral policy options with respect to the situation in the Korean Peninsula. The administration is late on that report at the present time. In light of the recent developments that we've seen on a possible meeting between the President and Kim, I'm even more convinced than ever that the administration needs to have a clear vision and a comprehensive strategy, and they need to present it to Congress. So I'm asking you, what do you think are our interim objectives for these talks with North Korea?
Sir, I believe that we'll go into these talks hopefully eyes wide open, and that you know, we continue to seek what we've said all along: a complete and a verifiable and irreversible denuclearized Korean Peninsula. I think that's what we're going to go into those talks with, and hopefully we'll come out with a framework that satisfies the President.
Do you consider it a success if there's no discussion of denuclearization on the Korean side, on the North Korean side, but simply just we'll stay where we are right now?
I don't know where we're going to end up with the talks. I don't think that the talks will be such that we accept as a positive that we end up where we are. But I'll go back to what Churchill once said. You know, it's better to talk than shoot.
Right.
So the fact that we're talking at all has a positive framework around it.
What do you think happens if, after these talks, there's no agreement made? Does that change how things continue moving forward after that point?
I couldn't tell you looking into the future, but I think that the fact that we talked, that has a value. If the talks produce nothing, you know, I mean, we're not, you know, we're talking about talks in April or May, I guess, soon anyway. So we haven't lost anything by talking. So the opportunity to engage has value of itself, regardless of the outcome.
And I'm just curious, what do you think Kim is hoping to get out of this? And obviously, I'm not holding you to an exact replication after the talks are over, but what, you're in a position of great influence and have done extraordinary service for our country. What do you think Kim is looking for out of this?
Well, if you're asking me to read his mind, I mean, that's a dark place.
I'm not asking you to read his mind. I'm asking your years of experience to give me an idea.
I believe that he seeks security, and he seeks respect, and he seeks reunification of the Korean Peninsula under his leadership. Those are his ultimate objectives, in my opinion. And the talks, if they produce results, or if they produce further talks to hopefully produce some good results, that'll be where the details lie.
What do you see as the biggest challenges with North Korea now, and what can we do to help you solve those?
I think the biggest challenge with North Korea is their nuclear program. They're both their missile development program and their weapons themselves. I think that one of the areas that I need help in that I don't have is persistent ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, so I can keep eyes on, an unblinking eye on North Korea, which we do not have today.
Well, let me just change for 1 second. I've just got a little bit of time left on conventional prompt strike. It's my understanding that Pacom, alongside Stratcom and EUCOM, has identified the development and fielding of a conventional prompt strike system as a high priority. Is that correct? And if so, could you elaborate on it?
It is correct, Senator, but I would like to respond to that question in a classified manner for the record. If
Okay.
you take that question.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Donnelly. Senator Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thanks for being here. Could you say publicly on the record some of what you've said to a number of us in private the last 2 or 3 days about how big China's Belt and Road Initiative is?
Senator, what I said the last couple of days was it's probably the biggest development program in the world. It's 5 times the amount of money that the United States, corrected for 2018 dollars, what the United States put into the Marshall Plan. It's a significant investment by China. The difference, as was mentioned earlier, was the Marshall Plan was philanthropic in nature and was designed to lift up the countries in Europe following World War II. And One Belt, One Road is designed to lift up China.
Yeah, I think just to underscore that, the Marshall Plan, which was foundational to the 75 years of military alliance across the Atlantic and of economic prosperity that benefited the U.S. and all of our allies, this current Chinese initiative is more than 5 times larger in net present value. Is the Belt and Road Initiative partially intended to marginalize the U.S. influence in the Pacific?
I agree.
What do our allies think right now, our military allies think about China's Belt and Road plans?
Our allies, as well as our friends and partners, they have to balance their own national interests, and they have to balance China with the United States. We're not asking them, or any country for that matter, to choose between China and the United States. What we hope is that that they'll see One Belt, One Road potentially for what it is. And I think that our allies are smart enough to do that, and they'll make the decisions that benefit them and us in terms of our alliances.
I certainly agree with you that we view a world where people should have commerce and peace with lots and lots of their neighbors, even in a multipolar world where the U.S. and China over the coming decades are going to be outsized relative to everyone else. And yet nations are partly going to be forced to choose between a rules-based international order and a Chinese system that is more interested in lifting up China with more vassal state, supplicant near neighbors. I know that you're not allowed, given your current calling and position, to answer a question as direct as, was it wise or foolish for the U.S. to pull out of TPP? But you can speculate with us. Is China happy that the U.S. pulled out of TPP?
I believe that China took advantage of the fact that we're not in TPP to try to drive a wedge between us and our TPP partners. China had a plan, the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Program, as a counter to TPP. And most of the countries, not all, but most of the countries that were in the original TPP formulation are in RCEP. So that should tell you right there that China sought to drive a wedge between us and our TPP partners.
And toggling between your current calling and where you're likely headed next, and I'm here with everybody else on this committee, sure that you're going to be easily confirmed as ambassador, and we're grateful for your continued service. When you look at your current calling and your next calling, the TPP without the U.S., can you speculate a little bit about what the potential ways that we might get back in might be?
I can't, Senator, other than to say that if we can reach a fair and equitable trade agreement with the TPP 11 countries, then that's probably the key to us getting back in. But as I said before, I'm focused on the security aspects of any relationship like TPP, rather than the economic aspects of which I'm not an expert.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Senator Sass. Senator Nelson.
Senator Sass, I asked Admiral Harris, upon him taking over as Pacific Commander, what was this is now 3 years ago, and congratulations to you. This is a perfect position for you to go into as ambassador. I asked, what's one of the most important things for our national security in the Pacific region? 3 years ago, the Admiral said, passing the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. Okay, so 3 years have passed and all of this has happened. And as brought out by your questioning, that puts us at a significant economic disadvantage. So, Admiral, you're going to be a diplomat in a short period of time. Now, of course, as a commander and as a warrior, you've also been a diplomat to wear those 4 stars, but you're going to be a real ambassador. What do we do now to make up for the last year and a half?
I'm not sure what we've lost in the last year and a half, Senator. I'm sorry.
Well, how do we gain back the economic advantage in the Pacific?
Well, I think we have to stay with it. We have to keep at it. I mean, it's not just the economic issues that are resident in the Pacific that are important to America. It's the security relationships and the whole framework that's informed by security on one part, the economy on the other part, and cultural ties that bind us to the countries in the Indo-Pacific region.
Okay, understood. Are you in a position to offer an opinion with regard to trying to resurrect something of a Pacific trade agreement?
I am not in that position, Senator.
Will you be as ambassador?
I might be, depending. I mean, I've never been an ambassador, so I'm not sure what challenges will cross my desk then if I'm given that opportunity, if you all give me that opportunity. But I'll take it on and do what I have to do, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
You will be confirmed. And as ambassador to one of our important, very important allies in the region of the Pacific, I think it's going to be exceptionally important for you to weigh in on this, because this senator, and by the implication of the senator previously questioning, by his implication, his opinion, that we're losing ground economically, that they're getting in ahead of us. Tell me, in your prepared testimony, you highlighted the threat of China's growing arsenal of intermediate and short-range ballistic missiles, and on their threat to our forces, that certainly is a greater threat. How do we best defend against this threat, and particularly protect our people in the region and ensure their ability to operate?
Senator, I think it's key that we maintain our credible combat power. I think it's important that we fully resource the department's needs I'm grateful to the Congress for doing that in this 2-year budget deal. I'm hopeful that we'll get an appropriation to match the deal. But that's the most important thing, that we demonstrate to our friends, allies, partners, and adversaries that the United States is neither disinterested or declining power globally and in the region.
Do we need additional THAAD missiles in the region?
Today, I'm satisfied with the ballistic missile defense architecture that's resident in the region. THAAD in Korea, THAAD in Guam, Patriots throughout the area, and Japan's intent to buy Aegis ashore, and our Aegis ships and our ally and Japan's Aegis ships. That architecture works today. I'm concerned about North Korean missile development and where it'll be in the future. I'm grateful that that you all have funded the Defense of Hawaii radar, the Homeland Defense radar for Hawaii. That's an important thing. I've asked the Missile Defense Agency, MDA, to study whether we should have ground-based interceptors in Hawaii or not. I'm not smart enough on that to know, but I think we ought to study it in advance of where we think North Korea's missile development will go. Today, the architecture is sufficient, but it might not be in the mid-2020s.
In the mid-2020s, what we know about national missile defense, do you have information on the top of your head? What is our ability to hit an ICBM out of North Korea today with our national missile defense with those radars in Alaska?
Sir, without getting into the classified area, which I'm skirting pretty carefully right now without question, I'm confident in our systems today, and I don't own those systems for us. You know, that's Northern Command, and I'm confident in Lori Robinson's ability to do that today. I'd like to respond to that more fully, more fulsomely, with a classified question for the record.
That would be good, especially for 2020 and beyond. I thank you, Admiral.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And congratulations again to you. He's a Pensacola boy. Florida makes good again.
Thank you, sir.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Admiral Harris, I'll add my congratulations to you for wonderful service in this area. I look forward to working together with you in new ways. I want to ask you a couple of things. Might have been covered, but they matter to me, and they're important. So we've seen in the press discussion of, obviously, not just the concerns that we legitimately have about North Korea, but there's been a phrase that's been used publicly about, well, whether we could engage in sort of a bloody nose, some kind of a preemptive strike against North Korea. That makes it sound, you know, pretty de minimis, but my assumption would be, in calculating the validity of any such step, you would need to calculate what a likely response would be by North Korea. You couldn't go in with the expectation that it would just be sort of a one-off thing and with a guarantee of no response. And I think the response you'd have to contemplate would be twofold. One would be, what would North Korea's response would be, but also if the U.S. took some sort of unilateral or preemptive action, might it draw others into a conflict? China, for example, with the historical precedent of the Korean War as an example. And I'm assuming that as the DoD contemplates its own options, those sort of downstream consequences are things that you definitely think about. Am I correct in my assumption?
Yes, sir. We have no bloody nose strategy. I don't know what that is. The press have run with it. I'm charged with developing for the National Command Authority a range of options through the spectrum of violence. And I'm ready to execute whatever the President and the National Command Authority directs me to do. But a bloody nose strategy is not contemplated.
And again, I'm not going to ask you about what you advise the President. I'm going to ask you about your military judgment. It would not be a smart thing to think we could take some affirmative action against North Korea and then assume that that there would be no action in response, either against us or maybe against South Korea, and we couldn't also assume that it wouldn't draw other adversaries potentially into the conflict, correct?
Right. I believe, Senator, that if we do anything along the kinetic region of the spectrum of conflict, that we have to be ready to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we are ready to do the whole thing if ordered by the President.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You and I talked, and I know you've talked a bit about this, but I'm really intrigued with the notion of the Quad that has been discussed in some public hearings at Munich Security Conference, the notion of deepening the relationships between the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India around security cooperation. Senator King and I visited India in October of 2014 and visited the shipbuilding industry in India, and under the Modi government, it does seem like there's new opportunities for us to be partners. The Indian Navy sent a delegation to the United States a year or so later to look at our shipbuilding capacity. So talk a little bit about the Quad, and maybe in particular, since we've had longstanding security cooperation with Australia and Japan, how the addition to India to some of our security cooperation enhances American interests in the area.
Senator, I've said for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, that I think India is the biggest strategic opportunity for the United States. We share democratic values, we share the same concerns, and we operate more frequently in the Indo-Pacific region together. I think the Quad is an important construct of like-minded nations that can go after the challenges that are in the Indo-Pacific region. So that's Japan, United States, Australia, and India. But as I said earlier, you know, it's not the Quad is an idea. It's not rigid, I don't believe.
Exclusive. It's not exclusive.
Right. I mean, as I said, I think the Big Ten has 12 teams and the Big 12 has 14 teams or something like that.
That's a very astute observation that you made.
So, I mean, we're going into March Madness now. So I think the Quad is an idea, and it's an important idea that I think the countries are starting to get their arms around, including the United States. But India presents a great opportunity for us, and I think we present a great opportunity for India.
You also have said, and I agree with you, that Vietnam presents an opportunity. It's an opportunity with some challenges, obviously, and yet the Carl Vinson just was in Vietnam. I think it's the first carrier visit to Vietnam. That's a pretty big thing in terms of showing the relationship to our nations. If you could just maybe address opportunities there as well.
Yeah, Vietnam is an important country to the United States and to the region. What Vietnam says matters regionally and globally. They stand up to China. They're concerned about Chinese expansion and aggressiveness in the South China Sea. And to your point about Carl Vinson, USS Carl Vinson was the first carrier to visit Vietnam since the Vietnam War. Was a very successful visit. And I was ecstatic about the visit itself, the welcome by the government of Vietnam, and the outcomes of the visit.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, I'm over time, but just a comment sort of for the committee as much as for Admiral Harris. I don't think anything shows the possibility of American magnanimity in the world more than a picture of the USS John McCain docked in Da Nang Harbor or the Carl Vinson in Vietnam. The fact that with a former adversary where the scar tissues are still very alive in the American public and Vietnam War veterans, this is an adversary that deeply wants a partnership with the United States, just as Japan and Germany deeply wanted partnership with the United States after World War II. That shows that people recognize the United States, for all its imperfections and warts, is still a country with high values and still a country that they want to be in partnership with. And I think that's a positive sign. Admiral House, thank you for your testimony.
We are the security partner of choice for many countries, including Vietnam.
Thank you, Admiral.
Agreed. And having just returned from viewing the repairs that were taking place on that, I agree with you. Thank you so much, Admiral Harris. Before someone else shows up, we're going to adjourn this meeting. And appreciate very much your patience and your service.
Thank you.